So honored to be here and so grateful that each of you have said yes. Said yes to this moment, said yes to walking through that door. As Temple said, riding through the storm that is also known as a mist of a little water, a California storm, right? To make it here to this moment. And I have a question for you. What if this is the very best moment of your entire life? What if this is it? We've been in a conversation. This is the fourth time I've been here in about 18 months, and we've been in this conversation, and I've been asking you the question, what if this is the most enlightened you will ever be? Now what? Because we think sometimes, and we've been taught sometimes, that it's a journey and that one day we will. One day I will find the perfect partner, even though I've just discovered I have a new girlfriend, which is, I'll let my husband know right away. I'm sure he'll be fine because my husband's a Leo too. It'll just be a big Leo fest. It is the 21st century after all. But once I go to that next perfect workshop, once I hear that next profound speaker, once I hear the perfect song, and all of that is true, and then there's something much greater happening, and that is a recognition and an understanding that this is it right here. And this is the only moment that's ever existed. As a matter of fact, it's only in the mind that we believe there's a past and a future. I want to lean into that for a moment, because what I'm talking today is beyond the law of attraction. How many of y'all have heard of the law of attraction? I know even the people who are new here, I know you've heard of the law of attraction. And how many of you have practiced the law of attraction? And how has it worked? It's worked. Okay, great. And has it always worked for you? Oh, not always. So it sometimes works, right? They fell right into it. They sure did. It was an easy crowd, right? Or maybe if you're like me, you manifested everything you've ever desired, and then you're like, is that all there is? I remember when I was a good student of Unity, I came to Unity in 1988 or 1989. I'm not always the best reporter of time, but at that time I felt very broken. And I believed that the world was a brutal and hostile place, very deeply in my soul. I didn't yet understand there was a place underneath that was unharmed and unharmable, that there was an essence within me that could never be touched or harmed, that it was always whole, complete, and perfect. I just believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me, and then guess what? That's how I saw the world. The world is broken. And I walked into Unity and I heard this teaching: change your thinking, change your thinking, change your life. Thoughts held in mind create after their kind. In other words, it was the law of attraction before the law of attraction, right? Unity's been saying this since the 1800s. And yet we're in this beautiful moment right now. And some of us are really interested in the evolution of new thought, the next level of new thought. And it's not that one level is better than another, because we wouldn't say you shouldn't be 12 years old or you shouldn't be 82. They're both just a different experience of being human. So whatever level of consciousness we're bringing to our life is always the perfect level. And then we want to ask the question, what else is possible? Change your thinking, change your life. I spent the next, if I'm honest, 20 years trying to do that. With some success, I will say, oh, I have a new thought. This is a different thought than I used to have. Maybe the world isn't broken, but this is how it looked. And I was part of this community, and it wasn't Unity, but it was Unity adjacent. We all know what we mean, right? We had rubber bands on our wrist, and if we said anything that we perceived to be negative, we would flip it. Oh, don't say that. The universe will get you. Right? Don't have that thought. Oh my gosh, cancel, Temple. Don't say that, because, and I'm thinking, did we grow up in some punishing religion and we just came in here and redressed it, and now we call it the cosmic 2x4 instead of a punishing God? Right? And so there was a place, and this is what I want to talk about today. There's a place that we move beyond the understanding, the awareness that we change our thinking and change our life. And that is, as Temple said, that Deepak said, there, we've done it twice, the space between the thoughts. And when I spend time in the space between the thoughts, then I become separate from the thoughts, and I understand that I am the observer of that story, that collection of ideas and beliefs. And if I say I'm not that, then what am I going to say next? Well, then who or what am I? If I'm not my thoughts, then it's not about changing the thoughts. And so we have an evolution, and for me, I use the 4 rooms, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, as a framework. And when I came to Unity, I was in the physical consciousness. What I could see, what I could touch, what I could taste, what you were telling me, that was the one and only reality. And the world was a brutal and hostile place because I believed I was broken. And so when I spent those next 20 years shifting from physical world reality to realizing that I can actually change the way I'm perceiving the world and therefore change my experience of the world, I moved into that intellectual realm where I realized that thoughts were causative. Thoughts create reality. And that was very true. And I had, as many of us just admitted, some success with that. And sometimes I'm like, I've tried so hard to change the narrative. And yet I look around and I still see the blankety blank blank happening in the world. And it breaks my heart. Or I've spent all this time trying to change the narrative, and yet again, are you ready? Here I am again in the same relationship. Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep repeating this? Oh, I should flip that. Don't have that thought. Change that thinking. Otherwise, the universe will get you, and I'll find myself in the same relationship, at the same job, with the same bank account. My good friend, Reverend Maureen Bass, one of my Unity ministers in Unity San Francisco in the early 2000s, said, if you look at your bank account, she was Southern, and I loved her accent. I think I said this last time I was here, but it bears repeating for some reason. If you look at your bank account and it's always been small, I want you to say, look how powerful I am. I keep creating a very small bank account. I keep creating lack. Look at my relationships. Are they unsatisfying? Look how powerful I am. I keep creating this same relationship over and over and over again. It's as if I have this psychic ability to connect with that person. Guess what? That's the reality. And it's beyond thought. And so we're in a time of evolution right now within New Thought and on planet Earth, where we're starting to shift into a more emotional awareness. And we're going to move beyond emotions in a minute, but for now we're going to stay there, because a lot of times, you like moving beyond emotions? No, you want to be in these emotions, right? Because if you've been, how long have you been in New Thought? About 3 years. And has there been a big conversation about emotions? There has been. See, we're evolving. Isn't that amazing? Because back when, I don't know what year you came to Unity. 77, we were not talking about feelings. I'll tell you that right now. We were like, don't talk about that, just call everything good. And someone would come and say, I received a cancer diagnosis. And we would say, well, what's great about that? It's really what happened. It is sad. She's a witness. It's metaphysical malpractice, right? Or the ever popular, what did I do to create this?
Yeah.
And so where we're moving now is we're honoring the emotions as part of the experience of the awakening process. Because if I'm not allowing myself to feel, then I'm actually burying parts of myself deeper into the shadow, and I'm using the mind to try to change the narrative so that I can change the outcome, but really I'm not looking at something much deeper that's happening. And so for me, the only way out is through, and the way through is to begin to realize that the emotions have a very strong, powerful part in the evolution, the spiritual awakening. It's not about moving away from emotions, it's about moving into these emotions. And then we move into what I really want to talk about today, when we move into the spiritual room, where we begin to understand that we are the space between the thoughts. That it's not actually about changing the narrative, it's about observing the narrative and starting to question everything we've ever done, believed, or perceived. Isn't it interesting that I have this point of view right now? What am I making this mean? Because the truth is, thoughts alone do not create reality. It's the frequency or the vibration that creates reality. So if it's true that we come into the world as effervescent, whole and perfect beings, and as we teach in unity, there's one power and one presence, and this presence is our very life, and that we're emanations and expressions of this power. If that's the truth of our being, then what have we put on top of that? As Rumi said, our job is not to seek for love, but to look at the barriers we put on top of it. And as you said so beautifully, love can be right there. You didn't say this, but this is how I heard it. Love can be right there, but I will literally not be able to receive that if I feel unworthy of that. And so the vibration that I'm carrying around that I call core false beliefs, and I only say I call it that because I've added the word false because we are carrying around lies about ourselves, generational lies, lies about race, lies about gender, lies about socioeconomic status, about the very nature of humanity itself. So we walk into unity, and our hope is that we start to question everything. We start to say, what gets created when I believe this? What gets created when I have a moment of being in the space between the thoughts and start to observe those thoughts? What might happen if I were to say, thank you for sharing thought. I don't need to change you because I know there's a greater reality, and that greater reality is I am an infinite being. Let's say that together. I am an infinite being. I say yes. Yes to being an infinite being. And what might happen is it might not be a process. It might not take us time to get there. As a matter of fact, it might be that it can only happen right now. And it might even be that it just happened right now. We had an awareness of a greater reality beyond the thought. So if you're like me, 20 years of trying to change the narrative can dissolve in an instant, and we can say, oh, wow. I have compassion for that part of me that believed if I could just change the way I'm thinking, I can change my life. If I could just change and attract. And so let's talk about this attraction thing, right? The law of attraction says we change our thinking, and sometimes they talk about frequency and energy, and therefore we attract the experiences that we want into our life. So if you want a relationship, you start to act as if you have this relationship, you emit that frequency, and then you attract it. And it's a beautiful and wonderful thing, and as we've already established, sometimes it works, and then we're like, oh, I got you? That's what I've been manifesting this whole time? And here you are, and now what? Now I'm in this relationship, right? It's like we've been Disneyed, right? It's like, oh, happily ever after, the day we get married. No, that's where it begins. That's where the journey begins, right? The journey of authenticity and connection and love and expressing that love with one another and looking at those places where I resist it. Based on my old programming, my old ideas, and my old beliefs. The frequency attached to that. Someone can be standing right in front of me. So I'm just going to tell you, one of mine that I just absolutely loved. I'm just not good enough. I would not have told you I loved it. I would have told you I hated that and I wanted to get rid of it. Teach me how to have a different idea. But the issue was I decided that and absorbed that when I was about 5 years old. And my brain wasn't even developed enough to understand. Maybe mom and dad have some marital issues that they're not working through, or maybe the sexual trauma that has been passed down from generation to generation is showing up in the way they see and view me. Maybe my mother, being a product of the 1950s, who would have never chosen to be a parent had she been born 20 years later, and I know that because she used to say, Someone resonated over here. That was good. That was good. We're having an awakening. Because my mom used to say, if I had been born later, I probably wouldn't have chosen to have kids. Thanks, Mom. And as Temple says, if you're over 30, and I'm looking around, I think most of us are over 30, you can no longer blame your parents. We're not going to give you permission to do that. And so I absorbed and decided that I was unworthy at such a young age, so it's not a cognitive process to heal that. I have to hold with tenderness that precious little child that came into a world that wasn't going to celebrate the effervescence that we're celebrating here today. Into a family system that was taught there's lack, there's not enough in the world, will never be anything. All those things that I absorbed needed to be healed through a tender, loving embrace of that 5-year-old and an understanding that beneath all of that is still that precious being that came into the world as this effervescent being. So the process of embracing that and loving that part of me, then I can start to have a different awareness of the core decisions that I made about myself. So paradoxically, as I say, we don't need to change the thoughts. They change. It feels like magic because as I do the deeper healing and understand that I was absorbing other people's stuff, I can remember that precious being before the programming of the world. And that precious being is within every single one of us. And my question at this moment for you is, are you aware of your preciousness right now? I want you to, just for a moment, feel into what that preciousness feels like. See if you can get in touch with that. And I'm going to ask you to simply say out loud to this part of ourselves, I love you. I appreciate you. I honor you. I'm here for you. And it's in that holding and that healing that we understand that the past has been a collection of ideas that we have absorbed from the world. And so my provocative and perhaps controversial statement is, you can change the past. Because the past is alive in a memory. It doesn't mean we want to ever say to someone, maybe that didn't happen, but what we want to say is, what did you decide about yourself and what did you absorb when that happened? Do you hear the difference? It's profound. It sounds like semantics, but it's a completely different way of being. Because we say things like, well, we can't change the past. What happened, happened. Let's try to heal that. No, let's say something happened, I made decisions and I absorbed things about myself, and that became the operating system. That became my core frequency and my core vibration. I would walk into a room feeling unworthy, and let me tell you how I managed that. I've got this. I'm so good. I'm so great. Underneath it, I was like, please don't see me. Please don't see this part of me that feels so broken. And so as we move into the next evolution of new thought, we realize that it's actually moving into that space beyond the thoughts, honoring the emotional experience, loving our inner child, accepting what has happened as part of our journey, not through the lens of good and bad and right and wrong, but through the lens of what might get created if I were to have a different conclusion about myself. And from that conclusion, I have a different vibration about myself, and then suddenly it does feel like we attract everything that we've ever wanted. But this time we're not attracting it because once I get this, I will be free. Once I get this relationship, I will be happy. Once I get that house, then I will feel secure. Instead, we're going to flip that completely around and say the truth of who and what I am as a whole an infinite being. I am complete. I need no one or no thing to complete me, and yet I want to radiate this into the world. And so what do? We shift from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. We walk in the world knowing very deeply who and what we are, and that is infectious to the people around us. As Marianne says, then our light naturally, unconsciously, which it's true, it's not conscious, but don't you feel great when you're around Temple Hayes? Right? Don't you feel great? And I don't think I've given this quote here, and it's not about you, Temple. This is going to be a metaphor. But Dolly Parton says it takes a lot of work a lot of money to look this cheap. It takes a lot of work, spiritual evolution, awakening to be that presence in the midst of anything happening in the world. So rather than being against what's happening in the world, we unplug from that and we say, I know who I am in the midst of this. I am a presence for love. I am a presence for peace. We walk around like Temple, radiating this into the world, and lo and behold, we do end up then seemingly manifesting everything we've ever desired. So we call off the search. We rest in the reality of who and what we are. And we go out into the world as an experiment, radiating this love energy. And then that love energy then affects our physicality, our thoughts, and our emotions. So in closing, what I want to say is thank you. Thank you for being in this space. Thank you for being in this energy. Thank you for being in this exploration. I feel the shift happening in the room. Do you feel it? Sometimes we think words are so important. But the truth is, how we actually communicate is way beyond words or thoughts. So I'm going to invite us to take just a moment here to be with one another. I'm not going to keep your eyes open because I know how you Unity people are. You're going to close your eyes. I want you to keep your eyes open and just for a moment look around the room. Right? Do you feel that energy? Do you feel that love? This is who and what we've come to be. We're not here to manifest anything. You don't need to attract anything. You understand very deeply who and what you are. You radiate that into the world.